Yo, 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 what is going on, RoK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and we're actually going to be doing something pretty cool today. I've been wanting to do something like this for a while, but sometimes it's just a matter of waiting until we kind of find the right option or opportunity to do that. And so one of the players here, Jute, is actually starting up his own jumper project. And I thought it would be really cool to kind of help some people out and walk them through kind of giving an overview, giving just some insights, some tips, right? Kind of going through a little bit of a coaching advisement session. And so that's kind of what we're going to be seeing today. It's actually all happening in real time too as well, as we had just found time to reconnect. So we're going to walk through some of this, and I don't want to leave him hanging too much because he is expecting me to be on voice. But as always, if you enjoyed the content, make sure you sub, like, ring the notification bell. And of course, if you want to join our conversation, hit up the Discord. You can find that in the description and pin comment down below. And yes, of course, I should say that he did give his consent to as well. So here we go. All right. Yeah, I'm back. Thanks for that. Let me go ahead and join. Give me just a sec. Let's see. Okay, and I'm actually just going to pull this up as well, just so I can be looking while we're going back and forth. Okay, and so did you just end up making this? I think you told me you did something like a restart, maybe possibly on the server, but we just made this today. No, you're good. Okay, cool. Okay. And then I guess, can I ask, with where you're at, have you done a project before by chance, or is this your first project that you've done? Okay, this is your first. Okay. And I guess just so I can get some context here, because this will kind of help me navigate and figure out, maybe kind of where to start from, is how long have you been playing RoK? A little bit. Have you played for a while? So 10. A while. Okay. Yeah, like a while is in over a year or a little bit longer. Okay, 2, 3 years. Awesome. Okay, cool. So what kingdom? Do you remember what kingdoms you started out in, or maybe what kingdom you started out playing in that maybe you played for a little while there? It's okay to. I mean, again, if you don't recall, maybe okay. How about the oldest most? How about the oldest most recent kingdom that you played in that you can remember? A lot of accounts. Okay, got you. And so I guess with that being said, have you? I mean, I would imagine that you might have been an officer, or have you been a lead before? And if so, maybe a few times, or once or twice. Okay, okay, got it. So I think I guess can I ask as well, by chance, have you watched any of my like leader videos, like one of the more recent ones I did, whether it's the leader or the officer video that kind of is like the guide on what to do? I don't know if you've had a chance to watch those. Oh, oh, okay. Oh, sorry, let me see. No, not yet. Okay, no, that's no problem. Okay. So what I would say is, and obviously it just kind of depends. One of the things I usually always tell people is that, whether you've been a leader or you've been an officer for however long, right? Every individual comes in with their own level of knowledge and experience, right? So the amount of knowledge and experience you have differs from myself, differs from a friend of yours, from another person. And so, being a leader and an officer is not necessarily almost like being, a doctor, so to speak, right? Or a lawyer, where you kind of have to go through this minimum level of knowledge and experience that you would have to gain, right, to get certified. And because of that, it just can vary. And this is why I think it's really important when it comes to doing projects, right? I guess, can I ask to start off, like, why do you want to do a jumper project, kind of opposed to maybe just starting off in a new kingdom and leading an alliance or a successful alliance? I guess what's the driving force? What brought you to want to do a jump project compared to just going into a kingdom and, maybe trying to run like the top alliance there? Okay, leader of a decent alliance. Prompted a guy without any research and destroyed. Oh, promoted. Okay, got it. So you promoted a guy without any research, and he destroyed. You said he kicked all the members. Okay. Were you not able to? Were you not able to invite the members back? Essentially, or did maybe some come back but some left because? Oh no. Okay. Okay. Got it. Now, I guess, can I ask, in that situation? I mean, this is not all too uncommon, right? This happens sometimes. Hopefully, not all the time, right? Because it's not really the nicest thing that someone could do. But at the time, when you were going through the process of promoting the individual, right? Did you, I guess, did you interview the person at all? Like, ask them questions, try and get an idea on maybe who they were, what their experience was, maybe why they wanted to be an officer, were they someone who was active in chat? I guess, was there some criteria that gave you a good feeling about it and it just kind of hit you out of nowhere? Oh, sorry. Oh, excuse me. No, I think you answered that here. Maybe I was just not reading it. You said you promoted the guy without any research and he destroyed. Okay. Got it. So more of a gut feeling. Okay. All right. No worries. Yeah, I know. I think I've probably done that at least once or twice when I started out as well, and it definitely is. Unfortunately, I think it's almost like a kick in the face when it happens. Okay. So, but I guess that kind of still gets me to my main question, though, is that, right, you had that situation, right? If you consider it a good learning experience, as much as I have as well, for something that happened to myself similarly, from here, again, it's still kind of getting to that big question, which is, why not, if you had that learning experience, why not just try to run another alliance, but this time, obviously, with the improvements, making sure you kind of vet your officers. Why not try to do that, I guess, instead of, or why the jump project still, right, is where I'm curious before we kind of get to that. Everyone's looking at me right now like, yo, why is he dancing? I know, right? There's no music. I know I should be playing some music. Okay, Sin. Come on. Come on. Come on. Okay. You said, well, I would know my members really well, which to promote, which to demote. The longer the jump is, the more stable the alliance would be, in my opinion. Okay. Well, I think, I think that's what I'm trying to understand a little bit here is, right, because again, if it's mainly something about members, right, and kind of figuring out, ideal people to promote, to demote, right, as I was mentioning, that leader R5 video that I made is actually kind of a leader guide, and one of the sections, one of the parts in there that it does hit on really well, I think, is about, stop looking at my mic, which is about how to identify R4s, right? How to kind of notice and pay attention to which players are in the alliance that you may offer an officer position for, maybe you'd consider to be an officer, how to kind of distribute roles, those things as well. And I guess I'm curious there is, if it's really just about promoting and demoting, then, starting another alliance up and just kind of learning from those, kind of taking those strides and learning from those areas of improvement, could obviously just improve yourself as a leader going forward. I don't know if that necessarily kind of answers or kind of gives me a better idea on the reason for wanting to do a jump project over leading an alliance. And I guess I should say, are you looking to just do one alliance in your jump project? Is that kind of more of where you're getting at? Okay. Okay, got it. Multiple, all right. So I think what I will say kind of before we talk about the jump stuff specifically, I think it's really important for players to have a really good overall understanding of being a lead and kind of all the areas that come into it. Because the thing about when you're doing a jump project, right, is usually most of the time, if not every time, you're typically operating with two to more alliances, right? Multiple alliances in the project. And especially if you are going to be the lead or if another person is going to be the lead that you consider to be the project manager, right? Because typically when you start a project, someone has to be like the creator, right? Whether it's you or another, someone has to basically come up with the idea and say, hey, I'm going to do a jump project. I need to get a Discord ready. I need to, write out how we're going to do things. I need to get an ad set up. Like someone has to be that creator. Now it could usually be one person, maybe it's a few people that are kind of co-managing the project. And then that's even before you even get to the decision of figuring out if you want to lead an alliance or not, or if the people that are helping out want to lead alliances or not, right? If it's something that you're co-leading or co-managing at the time. But the important part here is that if you want to lead, like one of the foundational pieces, right, something that you really have to have a good and full understanding of, and I think do well in a lot of different areas, is lead an alliance, right, well, and have an understanding of all the different things that a player has to do or a leader has to do in the alliance. And I think when it comes to doing something like identifying R4s, right, and I think it's great that was something that you found, as kind of an opportunity to take something good away from, so that way to kind of do it better the next time around. I think that's the hope for everyone, or for most, I would imagine. But I think that in itself is something to build off of, right? So, and I say that because, managing a project is different than is totally different than, let's say, managing a one alliance. It's almost on two different tiers of level, because when you're managing an alliance, you are essentially just responsible for your one alliance's worth of members and your officers. When you are managing or even just leading a project, and that's whether you're doing it as an alliance lead because you're the creator of the project and you just wanted to lead an alliance as well, or if you're not and you're just kind of managing above the leaders, which is something that can be done as well. The thing is that you are now not only responsible for just your own alliance, right? And you're committing your time that it takes for you to manage your alliance, and the players and the officers have your meetings, right? Obviously, depending on how detailed and how much you really dive into it. But now you're also responsible for separating or committing your time to the other leaders, right? So you have to meet with the other leaders, meet with the other officers and the managers, also take into account all the other players. So it's a lot more than just your alliance. And one of the things I usually advise to people, especially if they're just starting out, is try to get a really good understanding of what it takes to lead one alliance, and then try and see if you're able to kind of do everything in that alliance to maybe be a top alliance, right? Whether it's the number one alliance or a top two, top three alliance, like one that's actually involved in KVK as well, right? Like an alliance that basically would be considered a contributor, right? Like a frontline force, so to speak, in KVK. Because typically, if you make it that far, your alliance has probably lasted long enough, and you've been doing well enough to be considered a contributing asset. But let's just say that you are there now, or at least you feel like you're there now. So when it comes to kind of doing the jump portion here, let me take a look. I think you just sent me the link too. So I think it's disasters. So let me see here. Okay. So we have, I'm just taking a look right now. So we got a welcome section. Okay, we got some server stat lock channels using some of the stat decks. Okay, let's see here. Okay. I guess, can you explain to me the server stat portion here where it's like Tsunami, Blizzard? Are these essentially kind of like the alliance names or the branches that we'd have there? Okay. Okay. Okay, got it. And then the family name or kind of the group name would be the disasters. And then we're basically kind of going Mother Nature hardcore into it. Okay, cool. Okay. All right, so we got a couple bots. Dank invite. Okay. All right. So I think one thing that I noticed right away, and I think this is just a great thing to do, is I think it's really good to gate access your Discord, right? So an example of this would be, like if you go on my Discord, right, you can see that there's certain public channels, and other Discords have this as well, where you'll have public channels that are kind of community-based channels, right? They're not really kind of game-specific, or maybe in some cases jumper-specific if your Discord is maybe one game focused. And then you have reaction roles, like toggle reaction roles that are set up. And then that way players can get access to the channel that way. And a lot of it actually just depends on how deep you want to go, right? You can do something simple, for example, like what I do, where I just have a reaction role that people can go and then they get access to the jumper section. You can have a channel that's dedicated. I've seen some people where they'll ask questions, right? They'll say like, hey, answer one of these few questions, right? Before you come and you get access. And then once you answer those, then you can give them the role. I've seen other servers where they'll have, maybe 6 or 7 questions that they'll ask. And basically what they'll do is they'll just attach a reaction role to the very last question, just assuming that kind of everyone answers the questions in order. And that's something you can do as well, right? So I think there's a few options. Okay. Oh, plan as questions. Yeah, and like I said, I don't really think one is better or worse than the other. I think it's just a matter of, how many hoops do you kind of want someone to jump through before they can kind of get into the jumper section. My approach has kind of just been, more straightforward where, if I want to try and increase, a conversion percentage for someone coming in, I just want to try and get them to the information as soon as possible. But if you are going to be active and you're going to be on, or if you have other people helping you with distributing roles or giving roles in that case, after players provide you answers to the questions, then yeah, that can work too as well. Okay. Yeah, and if you got a plan for that, I think that's great, right? I think gating is really important. I think I'm just going down the list now. So we got the invite tracker. I'm actually okay with the invite tracker. I've seen some people that have done that where, if you have some individuals that are coming to help, right, they're going to assist you in recruiting, and maybe you have a channel set up for that. That kind of gives instructions on how to go about doing that, and then where those invites will kind of go, if you're directing those to a certain place, or if you're telling them to kind of create the code and it'll kind of be from the invite tracker channel. Depending on how you have that set up, that can be fine as well. Sometimes you can make, I don't know if I want to say as much as like a competition about it, but you can at least use it to track, who's kind of helping out in recruiting, especially if you're going to do something with that, right? Maybe you do, maybe you give out like a temporary server role, or maybe you'll move their name to the top of the member list, or maybe you'll give them a shout out. I mean, there's obviously a few things you can do there. Okay. Let me keep going. So we got self roles. Okay. Okay, so we just got a few self roles so far. Let's see here. Got you. I my so this is something I think that's really important, right? One of the questions, or for like one of the reaction roles that I literally never do anymore is I ask how much people spend. I, do do you would you have an idea on why? I wouldn't ask that. Okay, so you said it's a visual rule. My plan that if a person chooses more than he spends, we can verify their accounts. Okay. So, okay, videos proof. Got it. And you're asking for screenshots or video proof of their accounts that shows that they spent on those accounts? Okay. Got you. So let me ask you what I think is a good question to ask, which is if a player has spent on a previous account or another account, what guarantees are you able to provide your group or even yourself that said player or players will spend again on these accounts? No answer. No, that's okay. It is somewhat of a rhetorical question, just because it is. The answer is kind of within the question, right? The fact is that there's no way for any of us to guarantee that anyone would spend. Right? They could tell us they're going to spend $1,000 a month, but the fact is that until they actually start spending and we see that they're spending, there's no way for us to know if they will spend or not. And I mean, you could have someone that has 100, 150, 200 mil account, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I want to start over. I want to spend." And sure, there might be a chance they will spend, maybe a higher chance than others, right? If they have a bigger, a big enough account, but there's still no guarantees that they will spend. Just as much as there's no guarantees that even if you get before the spending portion, right? What guarantees are people providing that they're going to jump with you, right? Even if you do a ready check before you start, right? And let's say you have 150 people that say they're going to make accounts with you on day one, and let's say 20 of those people are people that said, "Yeah, we spend money." I mean, sure, that might give you at least a soft indication, right? Maybe maybe a harder indication as far as how many people will come, but there's still no guarantee that every single person that did a ready check will jump, just as much as there's no guarantee that every person that did a reaction to how much they spend will spend that amount. Now some of the challenges, right now, I guess when it comes to the challenges itself, right? Let's say that you keep the role there, right? Let's just kind of go through a little test here. So you keep the role. You start recruiting. You're starting to get good traffic coming into the Discord. If players react to the spending role, and let's say you get a few people that are kind of mid-high level spenders, what do you think are some things that can happen from having that information public, given that anyone can click to see who reacted to those roles? So for example, right, if I go on the Discord and I look at the self roles channel, if you're looking there, I can right click. Excuse me, not right click, but I can click more, right, or right click as well, I believe. But I can click on the reactions drop down, right, on that post, on that specific post for how much do you spend, and I can look at all the people who reacted to a certain spending amount. What do you think are some things that could happen as potential challenges or kind of poor, maybe ill-intended things that could happen just because anyone that joins your Discord that gets access to your jumper section can now look at who your spenders are? What do you think are some things that could happen from that? Like things that just wouldn't be good things. Okay, so you said, let me see here. Well, a person from another jump group could come, see the possible high spenders, and offer them a good range to join their project. That is definitely at least one thing that could happen. That is for sure. I've seen this happen multiple times in projects that have those. So I think that it's kind of a good direction on the thought process there, right? After I just had explained it a little more clearly there. So that's one thing. A second thing that could happen too as well is you could have internal recruiting, right? You could have people that are maybe people you bring on as leaders, maybe people you bring on as officers, maybe just players who will try and maybe reach out to those people who click that they're spending. They'll reach out and say, "Hey, you really planning to spend?" Yeah, I'm probably going to spend this group. Oh, awesome. So I'm collecting a few spenders. I'm spending myself. If you join us, you'll be able to get more chests. So that's something that can happen. I've seen that happen a couple times as well, right? Because you have that information public. I've also seen situations where, and again, you'll have people, again, you'll have just sometimes people that come in and kind of have that same approach, right? So whether they're recruiting you to give you a role from another project, sometimes they'll just say, "Hey, look, I have like 10 high-level spenders, and we're just going to make one alliance. Everyone's going to get gold chests, and we're just going to go, run the kingdom, right? Or go rogue, whatever it may be." And so, it's similar, but it's kind of looking at it from the opposite side of it. It just shows that when you have that information public, those people who are reacting, right? And here's kind of another side piece for you here as well, is that there's a chance those players will get messaged, right? I shouldn't say a chance. There's a guarantee those players will get messaged. It's only a matter of how much they'll get messaged. And that can be annoying to some people, right? If they're constantly getting DM'd about, "Oh, hey, I see that you're spending," or if multiple people do it, right? That's not really something that they would look forward to, right? So more often than not, it's really just better overall if you just kind of let the spenders come as they may. Right. And you can choose to either, and one of the things I usually advise people is you can choose to either just do it randomly. You can assign people once you start seeing that people are spending. If people tell you they're going to spend, right, sometimes it's better just to collect that list privately or do it in some kind of a private way where you just basically have it as a list to watch out for, right? Where people say, yeah, I plan on spending, or you can do something, like even a Google form is an example of that, where the information would only come to you and you just wait to confirm, right? So you have a list of names, you wait to see if people spend, then you check them off and you're like, okay, this person's spending, this person's spending. Now, there's no way of knowing how much they're spending right until you'd have to wait a couple days or maybe a couple weeks to see, what the consistent volume of what they're spending is like. And those are things you can do to kind of track once they're in the alliances, but there's just no way to guarantee that. And the challenge is when you have that information public, it can just lead to people kind of doing those things, right? And the other thing to look at as well is that who's to say that someone doesn't lie to you, right? Who's to say that someone is a free-to-play player, but they select it and choose that they're a mid-spender, right? And let's say that you decided to distribute spenders between the 4 alliances or however many that you have, but they don't spend. They could be doing it just so they can get into an alliance that does spend, right? That's another side of looking at it as well, which is unfortunate, but it does happen. I've actually had that happen a couple times too as well, back when I was doing early projects and we never had public roles, but we took the information privately via forms that people would fill out, and myself and another were the only ones who had access to it. And we just over time realized that unfortunately some people just will lie about it because they just want to get into alliances to try and get chests. So it kind of just leads to more ill-intended, even if not on purpose, right? Okay, let me go down a little bit more here. So that's self-roles. Okay, we got questions and answers. You said, are you in another? So I think the thing here, so let me ask you, when you're asking someone a question, right? I think it's really important to try and ask like the right questions, right? Really good questions. So an example is when you ask, are you in another jump project? And if you are, which one? What type of a response are you looking for that is going to give you something of value, right? That is going to tell the player that's filling it out, hey, this is, this is maybe a good question, or the information you're getting from the question via that player's response is going to help you do something, positive with that information. It's going to help you really get some more data that can help you in the project, right? So for that first question, right, what do you think that first question does for you? Okay, so you're saying it helps me to know that if the members are possibly going to jump with us. If they say no, they have a better chance to jump. Okay, so let me ask you this: Why would they have a better chance to jump if they say no, they're not in another group? Because if they tell you no, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not in another group, right? The only way to check that, which would be to go into the profile and click on mutual servers to see if they are. But you would also have to be in all those other groups as well, right? So the only way to really verify is you would have to be in every single other jump project. And then when someone joins, you would click on their profile, mutual servers, and see if they're in another server, right? But if you're not in another project server, then it doesn't really matter if they tell you yes or no, right? Because so the where I'm getting at here is that let me ask you, do you think asking that question is more of an invasive question, like more of an aggressive type question? Or do you think that question is going to give you some information that you're going to be able to use in a positive way for the group? Right? How do you feel about the question overall? Because the question is not really going to tell you whether or not that they're going to join you or not. Doing a ready check once you're closer to the jump date and asking people, hey, we're jumping on this day, right? Maybe you're a week out, you're a couple days out, right? Who's planning to jump with us, right? Somewhere like a 5 to 7 day lead time. That will give you a better indication than asking people, because you have to think about it. These people are joining, right, for the very first time. You don't even have a date set yet, or you most likely probably don't have a date set yet, right? Especially if you're just starting out. So these people are coming to you as some of your early first recruits. And the expectation is that, or from what you're saying, right, the expectation by asking that question is this is going to give me an indication on if they're going to join and actually jump with me, which realistically, it's not. I understand where you're going with it, and that's something that a lot of other people do as well. But realistically, it's not telling you anything, because most of the time, players that join groups, well, what I should say is probably a little less than the majority of the time. What I'll say is maybe about 30 to 40% of the time, maybe 30 to 50 percentage of the time, players will join groups just to look around, right? And I guess actually the number probably is a little higher. Maybe it's like 50 to 60. But usually players will join groups just to take a look around. They just want to see. Sure, the majority of them are actually interested in jumping, but a lot of them just want to take a look around. They just want to see, what that group is offering, and then sure, you'll have a small portion of them that will just like diehard cult commit, right? Like they'll join a group and they'll just commit to it without knowing anything else. But a lot of times that's just because they're new players, right? There's always going to be a percentage of brand new players to the game who, you could be the first one to message them, and maybe you just come off nice, maybe you come off helpful, right, to them, and they're just like, okay, sure, why not? I'll join. Right, and they'll just kind of be like diehard loyal to you, right, all the way through. There's always a portion of players that do that. But when it comes to the question itself, right, the information we're getting from the question, like the data we're trying to collect, if the goal is to try and figure out who is going to be here for when we jump, who's actually planning to jump, then the ready check is more appropriate in this instance, where the question can almost be viewed as an indication for people to lie, right? Because if someone is a part of another group, do you think that every single player is going to be honest and say, yes, we are a part of another group, but we still just want to join to check it out? I mean, realistically, the answer there's no. Not everyone is going to be honest, right? You will have players that will just say, no, I'm not a part of another group, even though they are a part of another group. So, the question in itself is almost like passively intrusive when you ask it, which can sometimes be a turnoff for some people as well, right? Like, some people might think, well, why does this person want to know my business, right? That's something that some players will think because of a question like that being asked. A question like that could also turn people off from even just submitting questions as well to get answers to join. I guess, does that make any sense? Do you see where I'm coming from? Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, whether or not you keep the question in or not is obviously entirely up to you. I just kind of wanted to at least give you some experience advice from what I've seen. And from how I've seen that question come off a little bit. And one of the reasons why I personally would just never include that question. But there are groups that do include that question. Okay, so let me go and continue on here a little bit. So you said, what is your experience? So I think defining this a little bit more, right? Like, for example, where you have, right, I think the important thing is when we're asking questions, it's really good to not be redundant, right? So you ask this question in your question and answer channel, but you also have the same question in your self roles channel, right? The only difference is that the one in your roles channel says, how much experience do you have? The question itself says, or excuse me, the question there says, what is your experience? Right? So this is why I think it's really good that, when you're setting up your Discord, go through each channel one by one, create it, make sure the channels have a purpose and that, there's a reason behind them, like they're needed, where maybe you have to have an individual or a separate channel for it and you can't condense it, right? And think about, what kind of questions. One of the great ways you can do that is just go and take a look at other Discords, right? Go into other servers and see what questions they ask, right? And maybe use that as a way to get an idea on what questions can I ask? What am I really looking to get out of asking questions? And then is there a need to ask a lot? Yes, you are absolutely right. Most of the servers do ask these questions. I actually did a video review on Discord groups. This was maybe like 2 or 3 months ago, and it was in one of my jumper project, like how to do a jumper project series that I did. And I think in the first or the second part I did that, I like went into about 6 or 7 groups and kind of analyzed them. So yes, you are right. Most of the groups do ask these questions, but it is important to make sure we're not doubling up on questions, right? Because that can also be a turnoff, right? Players may not like or just may not think that that's good or that the group is organized, right? If you're asking one question in questions and answers channel and then you have the same exact question, even if it's worded differently in self roles, that kind of can give an indication that, maybe the group isn't that organized, right? Let me see here. So you said everyone after joining, you always have answer the question and mark the roles. Then you are a verified member. Are you another project? Your UTC time? Who invited you? Yeah, I mean, I think some of these questions are just redundant, even from this image, right? Like for example, I don't think there's a need to ask who invited you, because again, if you have an invite tracker, right? If you do like an invite tracker bot, you can keep track of that. You can also just keep track from the actual server settings. So you can go into the server settings, you can go under the invite tab, and you can see how many people have accepted an invite from someone, right? And you can keep track that way as well, without even having to use the bot or having to ask the question. So personally, I just think because of that, the question in itself doesn't really explain where the need to ask it is, right? For example, and then they say like, "Are you in another project?" Yeah, personally, I just wouldn't ask that. So let me see here. They ask, "What is your UTC time?" UTC time actually isn't a bad question to ask. It's just the challenge is that you don't know who's going to be sticking with you, right? So I mean, yeah, if you want to view it as like collecting the data early on, and you're going to plug that data into a spreadsheet or something, and then that way when you do your ready check, you have kind of a list of names already. I mean, I guess that's okay. Asking if people are interested in R4, I think that's actually fine. I mean, again, if you want to ask, yeah, interested in R4 or 5, I don't think that's a bad question to ask. But if you have, like for example, right on I don't know if you're in my server, if you've looked at my server, but we have like a jump positions channel. And in that channel, it lists all of the positions that we're recruiting for. It gives a description, and then it has an application form. I just basically went on Google Forms, right? Did something super simple. And then we also have a video that goes along with it. So there's like a video guide, right? So if you're not familiar, maybe you just haven't been in R5 or in R4 for a long time. You just kind of want to watch on what some of the expectations and the standards are, right? We kind of hit you with all the areas that you would really need to know. So the thing is that if you have a channel like that, you don't necessarily need to ask people if they're interested in an R4, because you can always just do an announcement after you have a certain amount of people join, right? And in that announcement, you can just say, hey, if anyone's interested in a position, you can head to this channel, fill out an application. But at the same time, if you ask the question, I don't necessarily think asking the question is inherently wrong either, because if anything, it helps you identify those people, and maybe you send the application to them in a DM, maybe you just ping them, and then you give them the channel name and you say, hey, noticed your, thanks for answering the questions, right? You can check this channel out if you want to apply, right? So again, it just depends on your approach, right? I don't necessarily think that question is good or bad. It really just depends on kind of how you're set up and how much work you want to do. And then the last one here is, do you have your own clan in some world? If so, write name and enter. So, I guess asking the question would tell you maybe how old of a kingdom or how new of a kingdom they're in. I think that kind of goes into, it's one of those things where it's part of it is kind of a redundant question because you're still asking people how much experience they have. The only difference here is that you're just asking them to specify, right, their experience with an actual kingdom, and possibly an alliance name. So maybe you're using, maybe you have like a blacklist of rogue alliances or something, and maybe you're familiar with all the bad or rogue alliances or alliances that have kind of a bad rap across the entire game. Even I don't have that, so that's kind of a lot to ask for. Again, like I said, there has to be a reason, right, when you're asking a question. It can't just be ask a question because other people are asking it, right? It really has to be, I'm asking a question because there is a specific type of information or specific data that I can get from the question that is going to help me out. And sometimes you can ask some general questions, right? I think, and I would kind of consider these to be kind of more fluff questions, kind of more engagement-based questions, right, for people that are here or for people that are joining. But you don't necessarily want to have, in my opinion, I think, too many questions, right, if they have to verify, because the more they have, you have to think about it, the more questions you ask or the more information that you're expecting in the question means the more time it now will take for that player to fill it out before they can get tagged with a role. And that can sometimes be a turnoff for some people too as well, right? If you're asking too many questions, maybe maybe they just say, this is too much, right? And maybe they just don't answer the questions as well. So I think that's another part to look at. So again, I don't really know maybe what the main purpose is of asking the kind of you have your own clan, because you can kind of more or less do the same thing with how much experience you have. You can even ask a question, what KVKs have you made it to? Right? I think that's probably a better question. I think that kind of shows, like, a good example is if you ask people, what KVK season have you made it to? That tells you that they at least have played. So if someone tells you, well, I'm an SOC. Well, now you know that, okay, well, this person has played KVK 1, 2, 3, and on top of that, they probably have at least some knowledge and some experience through each of those maps, through each of those KVK formats that they've played up until SOC, right? So sometimes thinking about how can I ask a question that's really going to give me good information. Like, I think that's a great question to ask, more so than, do you have a clan in some world, right? And just the way that the question is asked doesn't really come off as, I would say, the best worded, right? Or the most professional in that regard. I've opened your eyes. Sometimes, I'm always happy to deliver Jimmy Neutron brain blasts. So they're my favorite. Let me take a look at server rules. Okay, so nothing really there yet. Discord introduction. Okay, so we got an ad. Let me see here. We got a server link. Okay, cool. Hopefully that's a universal server link, like an infinite one with no limits on invites. But if it is, awesome. And then we have an ad. Okay, so let's look at the ad. We got member goal, member count. You have a starting day. Okay, jumping day is May 1st. Okay, so let me ask, why did you choose April 22nd for the starting date? Okay. So, let me ask you, how would you go about choosing a starting date? Okay. Okay. So usually when you're choosing a starting date, and again, this depends on what you're looking to get out of, right? Like if you're considering to try and get rewards, for example, whether it's from a KVK season at the beginning or the end, if maybe you have some old accounts and other servers and you guys can just, farm barb forts, or maybe you just jump there when a specific event is coming around and you just, let people kind of milk that. Having something, right? Having a reason for why you're going to do a jump date or when you're starting is really important, right? You have to know what you're aiming for. And it has to be more than just, we've hit our target member goal. So that's really important to identify, right? And to try and figure that out at least as early as you're able to, even though most of the time it may not, it may not happen until you're closer to your jump date, right? It could be a week, 2-3 weeks away, depending on what you're looking for. Sometimes you may already know where you're going to go, especially if you're going to an older kingdom that isn't really dependent on the beginning or the early time dates and intervals between KVKs or just seasons in general. But at least having that part figured out, right, is really important when we go about choosing a date. Let me see here. I think beyond that, let me see. So you got the vision. Cool. Like the vision. Mm-hmm. So in your ad, right, where it says, so for your vision, right, if we look at the second sentence, how do you feel about the second sentence? What do you think the second sentence says to people who are publicly reading that? Okay, it doesn't say anything. Okay. So let me ask this another way. When you say we will dominate, how do you think that sounds? What kind of message do you think that sends to the other people outside of your group for whatever kingdom you would land in if they were to by chance get wind of that or to read the ad? Toxic. Well, toxic might be harsh, but I guess that's one way of explaining it. When I read a message like that, the thing I read is does not want to include us, right? Doesn't want to share, doesn't want to work with. They just basically want to run the show just themselves, take everything for themselves, only resources for themselves, all the objectives for themselves. That's what I read. I think how we word things and the tone that we set in messages, in our ads, and announcements is extremely important, right? Really thinking about what we're saying and why we're saying it, right? The why is the most important part because the why can really define how you even word something to begin with. So I think that is something I at least would recommend on changing, right? Because the idea for the project and first and foremost, it also depends on what you want, right? If you want to just dominate the kingdom, then of course leave that in there, right? A lot of it really has to come down to what you are planning to do. Right, I can give general advice and kind of directions, pros and cons, share my experience, but a lot of it really comes down to what you want out of the project. You want to make a project so it can just be 6 alliances that run the entire kingdom? Cool. You want it to be 4 alliances that run the entire kingdom? Cool. You don't want to share with anyone, you want to share with everyone. It really does come down to what you want, right? And if you want to leave, hey, we're going to dominate, we're just going to be the only people that run the kingdom, then I would say at least define that. Right, so that way you're upfront, right, and you're transparent with people, so players know what to expect if they're joining. Just saying something broad and vague like, "Hey, we're gonna rule the kingdom," I mean, again, anyone could interpret that maybe one way or another, but probably go in one direction. So, Got you. Okay. Oh, your time's up. Yeah, no worries. I think we're almost like an hour too as well. So shocking that we ended up going this long. But yeah, like I said, I think there's some good things that you have going so far that we looked at. I think there's some areas there to take a look at a little bit more. I think a couple areas of improvement based on what we looked at. I think we pretty much almost got through the entire Discord as well. And then obviously some of the parts there in the beginning. So yeah, so if anything, Judd, like I said, man, I appreciate us being able to meet up, and the fact that you reached out and you were interested to kind of hear my thoughts and my opinions, on the project. And if anything, I hope I helped. Even though I know I talked a lot, I hope I was at least able to give some insights and some good feedback in a constructive way on some of the areas. Sure. No. That's awesome to hear. So I'm happy to hear that I wasn't just rambling, as my buddy Ghost would say. But yeah, no, that's awesome. And again, you're more than welcome. Like I said, I appreciate us being able to meet up and sit down and talk. So if again, I know you said your time's over, I will let you go. And again, man, I hope I hope everything works out for where you're going, and maybe we can catch up maybe again later. Once you kind of get things maybe going, or after you already land in Final Kingdom, as maybe a follow up. But definitely wishing you the best for sure. All right, take care, Jet. Later. All right. So that ends it there. That ends it there with Jet. Let me just move my feline here. Go over there, buddy. But yeah, so that ends it. Again, I think great conversation that we ended up having. It was really cool to kind of go through and speak with someone on them doing their project. And I'm sure you could probably notice right there, through the moments that I spoke about, there were a lot of insight pieces into what I feel are just good common denominators, right? And the part there towards the end, I think, is really important, because a lot of times it's not about mimicking or turning a project into another's vision, right? But sometimes really having an understanding of what does that person want out of the project, right? And so when you heard me talk in the beginning and kind of ask those questions on, what's the reason, right? Why are you doing the project? That's to try and really get an understanding of, why is this person, or for anyone, wanting to do a project in the first place, right? Are they wanting to do it because they just want to do a restart and they figure maybe they'll have the best chance to have a good, better experience, right? Maybe in a smaller capacity. Are they doing it because they do want to kind of rule and manage the kingdom in some way and try and maybe improve or shape that kingdom in a better way than maybe the kingdom they started out playing in? Are they doing it because they just want to be the top 2 to 3 alliances and just do, an LT rotation for those, and those alliances will have all of the structures, all the buildings, and there's only going to be those amount that go into KVK, and they just basically want to dominate everything, right? So it's kind of anything and everything in between, depending on what that individual or individuals want out of the project. And so that's why it's really important, I think, to try and get down to understanding why someone, right? What's the psychology there? What's the history behind why this person is choosing to do a jump project compared to just making an alliance in a kingdom and trying to be, a top alliance that way, and kind of just a contributing part or cog in that wheel, if you will. So if anything, I hope this was insightful for anyone who has stayed around this long to watch this video. Maybe I'll do some more like these in the future. I know my buddy Kirby and Queen, shout out to them, tell me that I should just start a business and charge people to do assessments. Who knows if that'll happen. But I do like doing these every once in a while, just because I think it's a great way to give some insight for players that are interested or curious on starting their own project. And you having an opportunity to hear me go through someone that's pretty, work with someone, right? Just give some advisement, give some constructive feedback on what I'm seeing. And with their stage being pretty early on, right? I think this is a great kind of starter entry level video guide and instruction, right, for people that are interested in doing that. And obviously a big shout out to Jet and to his project. I think I showed the link there, but if not, I'll show it one more time here for anyone that's interested in checking that out. And obviously you got to give some shout out there for the love because I know he was okay with me recording this session and putting it up for hopeful, just kind of good resource purposes. That's it for me. I would love to know what you guys thought, right, for the session. Would you like to see more kind of sessions like this? Or maybe we help other projects, or maybe even expand this to something like Kingdoms, right? That's something I'd love to actually do over a period of time when it comes to kind of management. But again, I'd love to know anything and everything you guys are thinking in those comments down below. That is it for me. Until next time, I'll catch you later.